I continually am amazed at just how powerful the influence we draw from the people around us, from the things that we see. And technology has only exacerbated that in many ways. After Odell Beckham Jr. became a giant and had this incredible one-handed catch, guess what? What do you think all the boys were doing? That's what they were practicing. This basketball player comes onto the scene and he's shooting threes like crazy. It changes the way the kids play on the basketball court. It's not just the celebrities and the athletes and the superstars that everybody just kind of really are influenced by. Can't help it but begin to do as they do and speak as they speak. One of the most profound places where influence is given and people are shaped in is in the home. That children, whether they know it or not, whether they hate their parents, they're echoing what their parents do and how they live. It's just from young age of a child, that's the way that they learn. I remember my mom calling me when Ellie was my first daughter. She was like, barely walking, and she was like, Ellie's doing something really weird. She walked to the door, she put her feet into your shoes and kept saying bye-bye to me. What's going on? And it dawned upon me, that's what we do every morning. We go to the door, we have Ellie before we go to work. I put my shoes on, I give her a hug and say, bye Ellie, bye Ellie. And she didn't know what she was doing, she was just imitating. It's still happening, whether I like it or not. In fact, my first daughter, Ellie, she has pretty much the same eating habits that I do. She loves meat. She loves meat. That girl can pound meat. We went to a Brazilian steakhouse, all you can eat. She was so unhappy. Not because the food was great. It was amazing. It's like, why couldn't I eat more? Why couldn't I stuff it more down? She was full too fast. This is my daughter. You can tell she's my daughter because look at the bag she carries. There's like stuff in there for like emergencies. Everybody who knows me is laughing because if you see my bag, I've got gadgets up for every eventuality. I got duct tape on my person. And I'm like, they take after that. My second daughter, if you look at her and she's sitting there and she's like shaking her feet and twiddling her pen, I'm like, oh my gosh. They pick up after what you do, just your habits. Sometimes knowingly, sometimes not even knowingly. They're going to be doing this. It's not simply just what they pick up after now when they're your children. Guess what? When they're parents, what do you think? How are they going to parent? Yeah. What are they going to start with? They're going to start with what they picked up from you. We are incredible influencers, not just by the habits or by the way what we say, but actually the things that are inside our hearts, how they begin to affect our home environment. They learn this from our parents. Andy Stanley says the home environment is shaped by the head of the home, by the parents themselves. He goes through some circumstances of saying basically, if you've got parents who are caught up in a system of guilt and secrets, they can't share, they don't know how to confess, and so they don't tell each other everything, and they obviously don't tell their children everything. Guess what? What are the children going to learn? They don't know how to tell the truth. They don't know how to even share the secrets in their hearts because the home environment has been shaped. When you see a young child on the baseball field arguing and being really angry, so I couldn't find a kid, having a tantrum on the baseball field, but when you see a young child being just really angry, guess what? Where did they learn that? They learned that in the home, where the father is the one who is constantly pouring out anger. When you see mothers who are expressing, flowing out from their heart, a sense of, why don't we have those things? I wish I had that. Envy and jealousy to the people who have nicer homes, nicer cars, nicer purses. Guess what? Don't be surprised if the children grow up with this profound sense of dissatisfaction at their life. Because they learned those heart movements at the home. Their hearts were shaped by the influences in their home. And guess what? That's the first place from which they begin to parent. Now, I know we're talking about parenting in this series a lot and in this sermon a lot, but I just wanted to kind of step back and say it's not just about parenting. It's about just influence. It's about relationships all around. Now, you might be a parent of a young child, and most of your energy and your investment is in terms of diapers and feedings and just, so on and so forth. But guess what? Already, they're picking up. And as they grow, quick before you even imagine, you're going to actually need to know that you're going to be shaping the way that their hearts are understood and how they move. Some of us actually have older children. We know that this is the battle that happens. It's no longer about just providing food and providing shelter. It's actually like, what are you shaping? How are you shepherding their hearts? But even if you're a single person or don't even have plans to engage in a form of parenting, guess what? This is what mentoring is. Mentoring is all about this. It's about having a heart that actually is able to be exposed before those that you're sharing your life with, being able to draw out the heart movements, the stuff underneath the surface of those that you're mentoring. This is what friendship's all about, ultimately. True friendship goes beyond just doing things together, enjoying certain events together. It's actually about keeping another person's heart in line and encouraging them, drawing them to have a not just a beautiful mind, but a beautiful heart. Relationships ultimately, you can't help but them to be oriented toward heart shaping. And that's what today's message is about. It's the last in the series that we've been covering, the book Enemies of the Heart by Andy Stanley, in our Grace Group season. And we've had a lot of stops and starts because of Mother's Day and of Easter and so on and so forth. But this is the last one. And in many ways, it is the culmination of what we've gone through. We've started with this recognition that it's not just about our external behavior, but there's stuff underneath the surface that God cares about that really does makes a difference in how we live. And ultimately, we walked through the 4 different enemies of the heart. We've walked through guilt and anger and greed and jealousy, like what they are and how do you notice them? How do you monitor them? And what do you do about them? What is God's way of dealing with them? We found so much is it reflecting heart issues, but it's hard to get at, and it requires more than just one, small group to talk through, more than one prayer. It requires energy and commitment and community, but this driving reality that it's the heart that's the control center of our lives. What's inside eventually comes out in our words, in our actions, in our relationships. This one simple verse really kind of nails it down simply. Above all else, kind of like a summary statement. Yes, not only pay attention to other aspects of your life, but above all else, guard your heart. Pay attention to what's going on there. Be attentive to the things that are underneath the surface that are actually driving you. For everything you do, your behavior, your choices, and your words flows out of the stuff that is underneath. It is a language, in some translations called, it is the wellspring of life. Okay? And a wellspring is this water underneath the surface that you cannot see that's pushing up. And as it comes out, it, is accessible. A beautiful wellspring is drinkable. And I remember I was in Thailand, and for a Westerner or grew up in a Western context to go to Southeast Asia, and somebody said, hey, we were hiking up in the mountains, and like, oh, this water's clean, you can drink it. I'm like, I'm not so sure. It's like, no, it's spring water. It's been filtered by the stones. I'm like, are you sure? And I drank it. It was the best water I've ever had. I didn't get sick. It was amazing, right? But I've also been to Yellowstone Park, and if you've ever been there, it's like Yellowstone's a great place, but there's geyser after geyser, mineral spring after mineral spring. We were there for like 3 days. The whole day it smelled like fart, okay? Because it's the sulfur that's coming up, And I wouldn't dare drink that stuff. It's toxic. It's nasty, right? Yeah, it's the stuff underneath the surface that either comes out and brings life to the people around you, or actually is like, putrid. It stinks, and it doesn't bring life. It's what's in the heart. It's the wellspring of life. And so we're called to pay attention to it, to guard it. And in this message, we're emphasizing it's not simply just in our own hearts and minds, but what does it mean to actually build a community, build a family, to shape others to know how to do this, to shepherd hearts, to guard their hearts, and so on and so forth. And that's the important part. This guarding the heart is definitely something we're called to do. We're called to invest in. But in fact, if life and relationship flows down streams of influence, then we get to not only guard our own hearts, but we get to influence people, to track them, to have a life that's guarding their hearts as well. We get to parent them. We get to shape them, shepherd them, so that, guess what? That which they learn, they can pass down, not only to their children, but to others as well. Well, first and foremost, guarding our hearts and shepherding other people's hearts come with, as we talked about, comes with our own modeling. Whether you're a parent, a mentor, a good friend, when it comes to shaping our children's hearts or others' hearts, modeling always wins out over instruction. Isn't this true? Yeah? Your dad can say this over and over and over again, but if he lives it a different way, guess what? You're going to follow and pay attention to what he does and what he models, not just their instruction. Now, when the modeling and the instruction are in line, that's very powerful, right? When they practice what they preach, it's very powerful. But when there is only instruction, do this, do that, why? Because I told you to, without the modeling, it's really, in many ways, very empty. It's very empty. And so that's the first thing that we want to remind ourselves of. Guarding our hearts and shepherding other hearts first starts with learning this ourselves. Being willing to let somebody else shepherd our hearts. To keep us into a place where, hey, what's going on underneath? Allowing God access to that area and responding to him. And the four aspects of kind of a culture, a way of living that guards our hearts are recognized, and this is all review in many ways, is in this. When there are guilt issues, when you're wrestling with guilt and you didn't know about it, but now you're finding out, what is the resolution? It is confession. It is not just a one-time thing, but a lifestyle, a habit. When you realize, oh, I got guilt issues. I didn't realize it. You bring that to a point of confession before God and others. If you got anger issues, you go through the process of, who am I angry at? What is the cost that I've incurred? And then to go and you settle it and you close the case. Forgiveness is the habit that we get to do over and over. We get to model for our children. When you've got greed issues and you're recognizing this, you go out of your way. And even when you don't think you're having the temptation to greed, you're living a lifestyle of generosity that prevents you from that. When you have jealousy concerns and you're realizing your heart is tempted that way, you go out of your way to celebrate another person's success. And so these habits of happiness that we model, kids, guess what? Are those who get to influence our children and our spiritual children, our mentorees, as well as our friends, our community. They begin to pick this up. It becomes something built in the culture. But there's something else that we can do to really intentionally shepherd others' hearts. And simply put, it's, as Andy Stanley says, is to ask questions. It's to ask questions. There's something beautiful about this that we're going to try to unpack a little that helps us to focus more on the heart than on behavior. But here's the problem. We have been built up in such a parenting model, if you're from an Asian context, such a parenting model that is so focused on behavior, that even in asking questions, these are the kinds of questions that we ask. The number one question that a parent asks a child: did you brush teeth? Okay. Did you do your homework? Did you clean up your room? Did you say thank you? What did I just say? Right? If you notice, these are questions, but they're all oriented toward behavior and performance. And so you're asking all these questions, and what you're telling the children or those you're influencing is, this is what is important. Put your energy and time in making sure that you can satisfy these questions. And so guess what? We raise up children that brush their teeth and do their homework. They get good grades. They are able to clean their room. They're organized. They have the social gestures, right? And they look like they're honoring and they're listening, right? But the stuff in the heart is not addressed because they can fake it really good. Where do they learn that? They learn that from their parents because all the energy is placed there. Those who are guarding their hearts don't just ask these questions, because these are important too. You don't want kids with, with tooth decay and not doing their homework and with nasty rooms and so on and so forth. But what is the real important things? What are you telling your kids? What are you sharing with those that you get to really influence that is the critical stuff, the stuff that life is built around, the hard issues? And it means that it's a reminder that by asking certain kinds of questions, we are shifting from a focus that is just on behavior. Did you get the performance stuff done? Okay? Like at work, because that's what work life is like in many ways. Even sometimes family life is like that. Did you get this done? Did you, for husbands, did you check off all of the honey-do list, right? And for children too, right? Is this all this stuff done? To a freedom to actually shift more onto the issues, the matters of the heart. And when you find what God is after, even in the scriptures, you see him modeling this emphasis on what's going on underneath. Because if you don't deal with the stuff that's underneath, it's going to spill out. Early in the story of the Bible, you see the story of Cain and Abel. And in this story, they both have a way of livelihood. They have a way of establishing fruit, some consequence in their life. Abel is a farmer, and he's making vegetables, and Cain is raising animals. And they're not told and it expressly said you have to sacrifice. It's almost understood that this is what it means to honor God. So what do? They come and they sacrifice. Abel brings, it's the opposite, right? So actually, Abel is the one with the animals, and Cain is the one as the farmer. Abel brings what is described as the fat portions of his flock. The most expensive. We're talking like, is it A5? Who are meat lovers here, right? It's not just prime, it's like a higher version of prime, right? The most expensive, I saw it on Costco once, it was like 10 pounds for was it like $100 a pound pretty much. It was just ridiculous. He's bringing the most valuable meat as a way of saying, God, I love you. God, you're everything to me. Well, it says Cain brought just some. The half-rotten, the stuff that he can't eat or can't sell. Some. This is what's laying around. Nothing planned, just whatever. Okay? Token to God. And because of this, God is reading not the quantity. He's not looking at, there's blood here, there's not blood here. He's looking at, what is this offering is reflecting from the heart? He's looking at their hearts. And so he does not receive Cain's offering. And Cain sees that God is receiving Abel's offering, and Cain is angry with Abel, and Cain is jealous of Abel, and angry with God. Now, God could say, that's it, Cain. I reject you completely because you just bring crap to me, right? But instead, God comes to Cain and says, why are you angry? Why are you depressed? Isn't that interesting? He actually asks the question that gets at what the root issue is in Cain's heart. Because he says, it's not about the sacrifice itself. If your actions flow out of a right heart and a good heart, don't you know I'll see it, and this is what I'm after. But instead, it doesn't, unfortunately in this situation, Abel doesn't pay attention to his anger. He doesn't pay attention to the things that are being exposed and drawn out by God. In the next story, another story, by the way, Jesus actually does the same thing with the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler is so focused on behavior. What must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus actually walks him through a bunch of questions, trying to lead him to a place where he can see himself. What is his issue? What is his heart issue? And he says, have you followed the commandments? I followed every single one since I was a little boy. And he walks through the commandments, right? Have you not stolen, not committed adultery, have not lied, and so on. Yes. And Jesus says this one last question to expose what is really driving in the heart of the rich young ruler. All you have to do is sell all your things and follow me. This wasn't a cult, arrangement. This is saying, this is the thing that you can't do because your heart is caught up in greed. Yeah. It's the questions that begin to sort through. And we're called to begin to learn how to ask these kinds of questions in our shaping relationships. And so Andy Stanley talks about how even as a parent, he learned how to do this along the way with his first son. He started, putting his hand over his son's heart and saying, "Is everything okay in your heart?" Now, ask a 5-year-old boy, "Is everything okay in your heart?" And they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I feel healthy, I'm fine." There's no recognition. There's no ability to begin to process this. But he would follow up other questions, almost in a bedtime routine. He would ask stuff like, "Are you mad at anybody?" Like, what does that matter? Because, did you brush your teeth? Are you getting good grades? Did you do your homework? That's the important stuff, right? But he would ask these questions. Are you mad at anybody? Did anybody hurt your feelings today? Okay. He's raising up a sensitive boy. Why is he doing this? Did anyone break a promise to you today? It's kind of funny. Andy Stanley would say that this is usually a chance for the son or the children to basically remind the father that you promised that you would take me or you would pick up this up for me and you didn't. It would always be a place for Andy Stanley to have a time of confession and asking for forgiveness. But isn't that interesting how that would shape not only their relationship, but would shape the culture of the home, of the heart? Is there anything you want to tell me? Or will you stay in a place of guilt? There's a fear of, if you share this, how might your parents, feel about you? A fear of rejection. Yeah. This would be a powerful way, actually, to begin to shape the very relationality and the heart culture of your home. And I realize, this is not easy to get to. Like, if you ask these questions right away, you'd be like, "Oh, what is this?" And they'll look at you funny. Body language will say, "I have something, but I don't want to talk about it." In fact, we try to do this with our kids, just really get an idea of what they're going through. Even in like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, we'd ask, "So how was your day?" And the simple answer, "Fine, good." So we'd have to probe. "So what did you learn today?" "I forgot." "What happened today?" "Nothing." Right? And then, it's kind of like if you're a parent, you're busy. You got other things going, man. You're not going to, "Okay, fine." You don't even stop asking anymore, But if you ask questions, stuff like, my wife and I had to try to learn how to probe here. It's like, "So what'd you do at recess?" "Oh, we played this and this and that." "Who'd you play with?" To try to get a sense of where their friends are. "What happened? Did anything bad happen? Did anybody say anything?" And after a while, you begin to probe, and they begin to get not only used to, not that you're trying to, find fault, but you actually are trying to shape and bring some kind of encouragement along the way. You have to build that, even from a young age. And after a while, it gives them a chance to feel comfortable, not only having their heart exposed, but to realize that what's really important, it's not the other stuff as much as the heart stuff. My father didn't necessarily have a way of doing this with me, just partly because there was language issues. Think about it. He spoke primarily, his heart language was Korean, and he wasn't as educated, not like some of our other fathers, where they spoke English to us. And so, if he would ask these kinds of questions, I couldn't answer in the language that he would understand. So we just kept it at, "Did you eat?" "Show me your grades." Stuff like that. And I just thought, I have no problems now because my children speak the same language as me. But you know what? You parent in the way that you were parented. That's where you start off with. And it still is hard sometimes to go across these boundaries, these patterns, to really not only emphasize how important these things are in the heart. Sorry, I don't know why let's try that. But it's actually to learn how to do this. Yeah. It's not about the same language. It's actually, do you know how to speak and probe and expose and deal with the things of the heart? As you let somebody do this for you, as you submit to this, guess what? It becomes freer and truer to this for somebody else. These are the kinds of questions that my spiritual director asks me. He's not like, "So, did you preach really well? Right? Is your church growing? he's not asking those questions. He's asking stuff like, so what's going on in your heart? Yeah. And he'll probe a little and like, so how are you doing with Dad? He'll actually ask tough questions. Yeah. Where is this passion coming from? Yeah. And I think about that. And oftentimes I realize there is bitterness. There's anger. And I can say it's about injustice, but it really isn't. It's about a hurt. It's about feeling that I got gypped. And it's actually these kinds of relationships that become so significant and so valuable. Because it reminds me, this is what God is after. This is what life is about. I don't think it's right. All right. Sorry about the audio issues. So Ted Tripp, who writes a book that I encourage for young parents or those who want to actually kind of pay attention to this a little more, he writes a book called Shepherding the Child's Heart. And he says, and he reminds us, the heart determines behavior. Learn, therefore, to work back from behavior to the heart. Okay? Learn to be able to see if there's anger there, if they're fighting, or if there's a pursuit there, if there's passion there. Not just be negative, but learn to be able to track using questions and engagement. To work back from behavior to the heart. Learn how to expose the heart struggles. And to remind them that this is what you go through. And that you've grown as an influencer, as a parent, spiritual parent, to know how these have to do with drawing toward God through this. He reminds us that one of the most powerful ways that parents parent is not only through the engagement and the communication, it's through this pointing children in a Godward orientation. That all the stuff, the guilt, the greed, the anger, and the jealousy ultimately it's about God. That's how it gets addressed. That's how we find that our life is not only ministered to, becomes whole, but that these are all expressions of deep thirst for God. And when we truly know Him and we let God minister in our hearts, in these areas, we find deep satisfaction. So a parent or a spiritual parent not only just exposes them through the questions, not only shares and lives a life and models a life of guarding your own heart, but brings them to this is about God. This is about walking with Him, about trusting Him. It's about allowing God to cleanse us, to free us. And that this becomes the habit and the home environment that we get to experience and lead. I'm just going to have you bow your heads with me.